The galaxy had been at peace for centuries. Humanity had built vast empires, spread across countless planets, and formed alliances with various species. The United Earth Federation had long been known for its strength and resilience. It had weathered numerous storms, from space pirates to alien invasions, always coming out on top. But now, something was different. Something far more dangerous was coming. In the midst of this calm, the Federation's top leaders received a report that would shake them to their core. A massive enemy fleet, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, was headed straight for Earth. It wasn't just any fleet. This was an armada of the most powerful and advanced warships the galaxy had ever known, a force so massive that even the Federation's strongest defenses seemed puny in comparison. The enemy had no name, no reason. They came with only one clear objective: to destroy humanity. Across the Federation, panic began to spread. News of the fleet's arrival hit every screen and every broadcast station. Military leaders scrambled to make preparations. Cities began to evacuate, and the war machines of Earth were quickly mobilized. The hope was that the Federation's military might could hold off the fleet long enough for reinforcements to arrive. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. This wasn't just another battle. This was a fight for survival. At the heart of the Federation's defenses was a lone warship, the Horizon. Unlike the massive battleships and fleets surrounding Earth, the Horizon was small, sleek, and fast. It wasn't built for mass destruction, but rather for precision strikes. It was humanity's last hope. The captain of the Horizon, Commander Alex Drake, stood on the bridge of the ship, staring out into the vastness of space. His crew moved quickly around him, preparing for the inevitable battle. The Horizon wasn't ready for a war of this scale, but they had no choice. They had to fight. "Captain, the enemy fleet is only hours away," Lieutenant Kara Jansen reported, her voice tinged with urgency. Drake nodded but didn't speak. He had been in countless battles. But this was different. This wasn't a simple skirmish against pirates or invaders. This was the fight for the future of humanity. And they were outnumbered, outgunned, and if they were being honest with themselves, they were likely outclassed. "We'll hold them off," Drake finally said, his voice firm but weary. "All hands, prepare for battle. We fight for Earth, and we fight for humanity." His words hung in the air, but no one felt fully convinced. They knew that the odds were stacked against them, and the pressure weighed heavily on each of their shoulders. Every single person aboard the Horizon knew that this could be their final stand. The enemy was too powerful, and yet they couldn't back down. Humanity had a long history of rising against impossible odds. As the Horizon moved into position, Commander Drake ordered the crew to take their stations. The warship's weapons powered up, and its shields flickered to life. But even with all their preparations, the reality was grim. The fleet they were about to face was like nothing they had ever encountered. Hundreds of enemy ships, each one bigger and more powerful than the last. Their weapons could obliterate entire planets in a single strike, and they were all headed for Earth. Drake paced back and forth, his mind racing with strategies. The Horizon was fast, yes, but could it outmaneuver such a huge enemy fleet? Could it do enough damage before it was destroyed? The thought of losing the crew, losing everything, was unbearable. He glanced out of the window at the stars, the blackness of space stretching endlessly before him. He had always known that humanity's future would be shaped by moments like this, but he had never expected it to come so soon. "Captain, the fleet is closing in," said Ensign Kelly, her voice breaking through the tense silence. "They're not slowing down. They've locked onto us." Drake's heart pounded in his chest. The moment had arrived. The first wave of enemy ships appeared on the horizon, massive and intimidating. The Horizon was tiny in comparison, like a lone wolf surrounded by a pack of raging beasts. The enemy ships didn't hesitate. Their weapons fired, sending blasts of energy racing toward the horizon. "Race for impact," Drake shouted as the ship shook violently. The Horizon's shields flared brightly, absorbing the first few shots, but they were already weakening. The crew scrambled to keep the warship in one piece, but the reality was clear. The Horizon could not take much more of this. "We can't hold out much longer, Captain," Lieutenant Jansen called out. "Their weapons are too powerful." Drake clenched his fists, his mind working quickly. He had been trained for situations like this, but this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. They had to find a way to survive. They had to do something that no one thought possible. "We're not backing down," he said, turning to his crew. "This isn't just about winning. It's about survival. We fight until we can't fight anymore. Humanity never gives up." The crew, though terrified, nodded. They had no choice. The fleet had come for them, and they would not go down without a fight. The Horizon might be small, but it had the heart of humanity behind it. As the first shots hit again, Commander Drake ordered the ship into a series of evasive maneuvers, hoping to buy them some time. But deep down, he knew it wasn't enough. They were alone in this fight, and it was up to the Horizon to hold the line until help could arrive. The fleet was vast, and the odds were grim. But one thing was certain: humanity was not going to go down without a fight. The Horizon moved forward into the unknown, the galaxy's fate hanging by a thread. The enemy fleet loomed large in the distance, stretching across the horizon like an unstoppable storm. Hundreds of massive warships, each one larger and more intimidating than the next, appeared on the sensors, their sleek designs promising nothing but destruction. The Horizon, the last hope of humanity, stood in stark contrast. A single ship dwarfed by the power of its enemies. The Federation had no illusions. The battle to come would be one of the fiercest in human history, and the odds were already against them. Inside the Horizon, Commander Alex Drake could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The air was thick with tension as the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the battle ahead. The warship had been designed for precision, quick strikes, and rapid maneuvers. It wasn't built for long, drawn-out battles against overwhelming numbers. It was fast, but was it fast enough? The enemy fleet would likely surround them within moments. They were already facing an uphill battle, and the climb was steep. "All systems are operational, Captain," Lieutenant Kara Jansen reported, her voice steady, but tinged with the faintest trace of nervousness. "But their weapons are. We can't absorb much more firepower. We'll need to outmaneuver them." Drake nodded grimly, his gaze fixed on the vastness of space beyond the ship's viewport. He could see the first few enemy ships coming into range now, giant beasts of metal and destruction. They were moving toward the Horizon like a swarm of locusts, and there was no escaping them. There was only one way forward: fight. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Drake ordered. "We can't let them close in. We'll strike first, before they can form their full offensive." As the Horizon sped forward, its engines roaring to life, the crew braced for impact. The first wave of enemy fire came in fast, like a storm of energy beams, crashing into the Horizon's shields with devastating force. The ship rocked violently, but the shields held, just for now. "Shields are holding at 60%, Ensign Kelly reported, her face pale as she worked furiously at her console. "But they're weakening fast. We need to make our move soon, Captain." Drake clenched his jaw. The Horizon was strong, but not invincible. The enemy's weapons were designed to cut through shields with ease, and if they didn't find a way to disrupt the fleet's formation soon, they would be overwhelmed. "Hold steady," he said. "We need to take out their lead ships. If we can break their formation, we'll have a chance." The Horizon cut through space, moving at breakneck speeds. It was a ship built for agility, able to outmaneuver larger, slower enemies, but the fleet wasn't slowing down. Drake had been in battles before, but this felt different. The sheer number of enemy ships, their coordinated attack, and their overwhelming firepower made it feel like a hopeless situation. Yet, Commander Drake's resolve was unwavering. He couldn't let fear take hold. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. Target locked on lidship, Kara announced as the horizon swerved sharply to the left, dodging a barrage of enemy fire. Ready to fire. Fire at will, Drake commanded. The horizon's weapons lit up, launching a barrage of energy blasts toward the lidship. It struck the enemy vessel with pinpoint precision, causing a massive explosion as the ship's hull was torn apart. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining ships in the fleet quickly regrouped, bringing their heavy firepower to bear on the horizon. Direct hit to the starboard side. Ensign Kelly yelled. Shields are down to 40%. We can't take another hit like that. The battle raged on, with the horizon darting and weaving between the massive ships of the enemy fleet. The crew worked together like a well-oiled machine, each member doing their part to keep the ship intact. But despite their best efforts, the enemy's numbers were too great. Every move they made was countered by the relentless assault from the fleet. Drake's mind raced as he analyzed the situation. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and on the verge of losing. His eyes flicked to the status board in front of him. The horizon's shields were weakening with each passing second, and they had already sustained significant damage. The engines were beginning to fail, and they had no reinforcements coming. The Federation's fleet was still hours away, and by then, the horizon would likely be a burning hulk drifting in space. Captain, Lieutenant Jansen's voice broke through his thoughts. We need to make a choice. We can either fight and risk everything, or we retreat and try to survive for another day. But we can't keep dodging them forever. Drake looked at the display in front of him, where the enemy ships were closing in from all directions. The horizon was small, but it had something the fleet didn't: speed. If they could keep moving, if they could just get to the heart of the fleet and disrupt their command structure, they might stand a chance. It was a dangerous gambit, but it was their only hope. We're not retreating, Drake said, his voice firm. We're going to break through. We'll hit them hard and fast, right where it hurts. This isn't over. With that, he ordered the horizon into a series of high-speed evasive maneuvers, weaving between enemy ships as they closed in. The ship's weapons fired relentlessly, striking down enemies one by one, but the cost was high. The horizon was starting to show signs of strain, and they were running out of time. Hold on, Drake shouted to his crew. We'll make it through this. Humanity's survival depends on us. Stay focused. Stay together. The crew nodded, their fear turning into determination. They couldn't afford to fail. They had no choice but to keep fighting, no matter the odds. As the horizon tore through the heart of the enemy fleet, Drake knew that they had only one shot at victory. But with every second that passed, the battle became more intense, more uncertain. The outcome would depend on their courage, their resolve, and their willingness to face the impossible. The horizon was now deep within the heart of the enemy fleet, the chaos of battle swirling around it. Ships exploded in every direction, the silence of space shattered by the deafening blasts of weapons fire. Commander Drake gripped the edge of his console, his knuckles turning white, as he watched the battle unfold before him. They had made it this far, but the path ahead was anything but certain. The horizon was severely damaged, its shields barely holding, and every minute that passed felt like a countdown to their destruction. Enemy capital ship approaching. Lieutenant Kara Jansen called out from her station. Her voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the anxiety in her tone. It's the Nemesis, their flagship. The Nemesis was one of the largest ships in the enemy fleet, a behemoth bristling with weapons and armor. Its sheer size made it an impenetrable wall, and its weapons had the power to obliterate anything in their path. If they didn't neutralize it, the horizon would stand no chance. Drake's mind raced as he thought of their options. They couldn't afford to face it head-on, not in their current state. They needed to find a way to outsmart it. Can we get close enough to disable its weapons? Drake asked, his eyes scanning the redouts. Take out its engines, or something to give us an advantage. We can try, Kara replied, her fingers flying over her console as she pulled up tactical data. "But it'll be a risky maneuver. If we get too close, their heavy turrets will rip us apart before we even get within range." Drake exhaled sharply. The horizon was fast, but it was also vulnerable. The Nemesis wasn't just a ship, it was a fortress. But it was also vulnerable. Every ship had weak points, no matter how powerful. It was a matter of finding those weaknesses and exploiting them. "We'll need to take out their sensors first," Drake decided. "Without them, they won't be able to track us properly." "Kara, can you pinpoint their sensor arrays?" "Working on it," Kara said, her voice low in concentration. "Got it. 2 large sensor arrays on the upper hull. They're protected by heavy armor, but nothing we can't get through." Drake's heart beat faster as he turned to face his crew. "We're going to make a run for it. We'll go straight for the sensors, disable them, and then pull back. If we can blind their flagship, we stand a chance." The crew nodded, their faces grim but resolute. Everyone knew the stakes. This wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message. Humanity was fighting for its place in the galaxy, and they wouldn't back down now. "On my mark," Drake said, leaning forward as he activated the ship's communication system. "Prepare for high-speed evasive maneuvers. Once we hit those sensors, we're pulling back full speed." The horizon lurched forward, its engines screaming as it accelerated toward the Nemesis. The battle raged on all around them, but for a moment, it felt as though the world had narrowed to a single point. The only thing that mattered was getting to the Nemesis and destroying its sensors before they were obliterated. The enemy fleet seemed to part before them as the horizon shot forward, its speed making it almost a blur against the backdrop of the stars. The Nemesis loomed larger with every second, its massive silhouette blocking out the stars. Drake could feel the sweat on his brow as the countdown ticked in his mind. "Firing thrusters to dodge incoming fire," Kara called, and the horizon shifted sharply to the right, narrowly avoiding a stream of laser fire from a nearby destroyer. "Stay on course," Drake ordered, gripping his seat. The horizon jolted as another blast shook the hull, but the shields held strong for now. The crew was used to the constant barrage of enemy fire, but the constant tension was wearing on them all. They were getting closer. 20 seconds to target," Kara said, her fingers flying over the controls. Drake's eyes never left the screen as the Nemesis grew ever closer. He could almost hear the pounding of his own heart, his breath coming in shallow gasps. This was the moment. If they failed now, it was all over. "Mark," Drake shouted. The horizon darted forward at breakneck speed, closing the distance between them and the Nemesis. Weapons fire streaked past them, missing by mere inches as the ship weaved through the storm of blasts. The massive sensor arrays of the Nemesis were now within range. "Targeting sensors," Kara said, voice steady. "Weapons online." The horizon's cannons roared to life, firing in quick succession. The first blast struck the lower sensor array, causing a massive explosion. But the second shot missed its mark, barely grazing the armor. Kara cursed under her breath, recalculating the angle. "Steady, Kara. We need to finish this," Drake said, his voice a calm anchor amid the chaos. "Got it," Kara snapped. Second shots on target. The horizon fired again, and this time, the blast hit true. The sensor array on the upper hull of the Nemesis erupted in a fiery explosion, sending debris scattering in all directions. Drake allowed himself a brief breath of relief. "Sensors are down," Kara reported. "They're blind." "Now get us out of here," Drake commanded. The horizon swerved sharply, veering off course as the Nemesis's weapons, now blind, fired wildly into empty space. The fleet around them seemed to lose coordination, their attacks disorganized without the flagship's guidance. For a brief moment, the horizon had the advantage. But even as they made their escape, Drake knew that this was far from over. The fleet wasn't defeated. The Nemesis wasn't destroyed. But for the first time in this battle, humanity had gained a foothold. They had struck a powerful blow, and the galaxy had just learned that humanity wasn't going to go down quietly. Not now. Not ever. Get ready for the next phase, Drake said, his eyes narrowed. This fight is far from over. The horizon was in full retreat, darting through the starry expanse as the Nemesis and its fleet scrambled to reorient themselves. The massive enemy ship was still in one piece, but its sensors were down, leaving it vulnerable for the first time in the battle. Commander Drake gripped the armrest of his seat, his knuckles white, as he reviewed the data flashing on his screen. "We've bought ourselves some time, but it's not enough," Kara reported, her voice tight with the pressure of the moment. "They're regrouping. Their smaller ships are closing in on us." Drake knew the situation was dire. The horizon was fast, but against the sheer numbers of the enemy fleet, it was a small, solitary target in a vast expanse of space. They needed more than just time. They needed a plan that would allow them to keep their distance while dealing more damage to the enemy's strength. "How long before the Nemesis can fix its sensors?" Drake asked, his voice calm, but with an edge of urgency. They couldn't afford to wait too long. "At least 5 minutes," Kara replied. "But that's if they don't detect us first. Our stealth systems are still holding, but we can't stay invisible forever." "We won't need forever," Drake said, narrowing his eyes as he studied the holographic map of the battlefield. "We need to hit them again, and hit them hard. We can't let them regain control." His mind raced, calculating their options. They had one shot at this, a single strike that could turn the tide of the battle. The Horizon's weapons were still functional, but their ammo was running low. The rest of their fleet was far away, and it was uncertain whether reinforcements would arrive in time to make a difference. "Can we make it to their command ship?" Drake asked, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the console. Kara glanced at the screen, her face tense as she considered the question. "It's risky. Their command ship is heavily protected. Even with the Nemesis blind, it's still a fortress." Drake didn't hesitate. "We have no choice. We take out their command ship or we're done for." The plan was simple. If they could infiltrate the enemy's command ship and disable its communications, they might be able to disrupt the coordination of the fleet, buying them enough time to escape. But it was a suicide mission. Every move would need to be calculated perfectly, every shot fired with precision. The Horizon was one ship against an entire fleet, and even though it was quick and maneuverable, it could only do so much before the overwhelming force of the enemy took its toll. "Prepare for a direct assault," Drake ordered, his voice low but resolute. "We'll need to disable their outer defenses before we make our move." "Understood," Kara replied, her fingers flying over the controls. Initiating evasive maneuvers, setting course for the command ship. The Horizon shot forward, darting between enemy fire, narrowly avoiding blasts as it surged toward the heart of the fleet. They had no time to waste. Every moment spent dodging the endless waves of enemy ships meant one more moment for the Nemesis to restore its sensors and for the enemy to regain control of the battle. Targeting the command ship's outer defenses, Kara announced, her voice steady despite the tension. "We'll need to weaken their shields before we can make our run at the core." "Make it happen," Drake said, his gaze fixed on the screen. "And keep the Horizon moving. We can't afford to be a sitting duck." The Horizon twisted and turned, its engines screaming as it evaded a volley of fire from an enemy destroyer. Kara fired back, the ship's weapons blazing as they hammered at the shields of the command ship. It was a delicate operation. Too much damage, and they'd be noticed. Too little, and they wouldn't be able to break through the defenses. "Shields are weakening," Kara said, her voice filled with a hint of triumph. "We're getting through." Drake watched the status updates flash on the screen, the damage to the command ship becoming evident. The shields were holding, but they were starting to falter. This was their chance. "Now," Drake barked. Kara slammed the control panel, and the Horizon lurched forward as they made their run at the heart of the enemy command ship. The massive vessel loomed in front of them, its surface a labyrinth of turrets, weapons, and armor. The horizon shot forward like a bolt of lightning, dodging incoming fire with unparalleled agility as it closed the distance to the command ship. "Almost there," Kara said, sweat beading on her forehead. "Brace for impact." The horizon slammed into the enemy ship's outer hull, the impact shaking the entire vessel. The ship's shields flared brightly, but they held firm as they crashed through layers of armor and shields. The horizon's hull groaned under the strain, but it was designed for moments like this. With a final push, they pierced through the defenses, cutting into the heart of the command ship. "Engage emergency thrusters," Drake shouted. "Get us into their control center." Kara didn't hesitate, engaging the emergency thrusters that sent the horizon flying deeper into the bowels of the enemy ship. The crew was bracing for whatever came next, each of them fully aware of the risks involved. They were behind enemy lines now, and there was no going back. As they sped through the narrow corridors of the command ship, Drake could feel the weight of the moment. This was their last chance to end the battle on their terms. If they could destroy the command center, they could cripple the entire fleet. If they failed, it would all be over. "Almost there," Kara said, her voice tight as they navigated the winding paths of the ship's inner chambers. "We've reached their control room." Drake turned to the crew, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "This is it. We take control, or we die trying." The doors to the control room were ahead, a massive reinforced steel door blocking their way. The horizon was closing in, and there was no time to waste. This final assault would decide the fate of the galaxy. "Ready your weapons," Drake said. "And on my signal, we take it." The control room was just ahead, but every step felt like an eternity. The crew of the horizon moved with quiet precision, their hearts pounding in their chests as the moment of truth drew nearer. They were deep inside the belly of the enemy command ship, and the silence in the corridors felt suffocating. Even the faint hum of the horizon's engines seemed muted now, as though space itself was holding its breath. Drake led the charge, his hand resting on the cold metal of the door to the control room. He didn't hesitate. He couldn't. Not now. He gave the signal to Kara, who tapped a few quick commands into her console, unlocking the massive doors with a hiss of hydraulic mechanisms. The doors slid open with a groan, revealing a stark, high-tech control center, full of flickering holographic screens and rows of armored guards. But they weren't prepared for what was coming. The crew flooded into the room, weapons drawn, eyes scanning every corner. The guards inside, dressed in black, stood frozen for a split second, shocked by the sudden intrusion. That hesitation cost them everything. Drake took the first shot, his pulse rifle cutting through the air with deadly accuracy. A guard fell instantly, but others reacted quickly, drawing their own weapons. The control room erupted into chaos. Shots rang out, ricocheting off the metal walls, but the Horizon crew was ready. Kara's hands flew over her controls, activating the ship's automated systems to create a distraction that sent sparks flying from the nearest console. This gave the crew just enough time to engage the remaining guards. "Clear the room," Drake shouted, ducking behind a control panel as a barrage of plasma fire whizzed past him. He could hear the heavy thuds of boots on metal as more guards poured in from a hidden passageway. The Horizon crew fought with all their might, a blur of fast movements and pinpoint shots. Every action was calculated, every shot planned. Drake's thoughts were laser-focused on one thing: taking control of the enemy's communication system. If they could cut off the fleet's leadership, the battle would be theirs. Kara, having secured a vantage point behind a pillar, fired another round, taking down 2 more guards. "We're getting overwhelmed," she shouted, her voice tinged with urgency. "We need backup now, or we'll be surrounded." Drake's mind raced, his fingers almost burning as they worked quickly to hack into the command ship's central system. He needed to take control of their communications, shut down their fleet coordination. If he could do that, the enemy ships would be flying blind, unable to respond to his next move. Almost there. Drake gritted his teeth, sweat trickling down his forehead as he manipulated the interface in front of him. His fingers flew across the controls, bypassing security measures and unlocking critical systems. With a final flourish, he entered the last command, locking himself into the network. The command room's holographic displays flickered for a moment, and then a series of alerts began to flash. Drake watched, a sense of triumph slowly building in his chest as he initiated a complete shutdown of the enemy fleet's communications. Suddenly, the control room's displays blinked out, leaving only a harsh, flashing red light. The battle had taken a drastic turn. Done. Drake shouted, stepping back as the control system went into total chaos. Their communications are down. The fleet is flying blind. The change was immediate. Outside, the Nemesis and its supporting ships were still locked in combat with the rest of the enemy fleet, but now their movements were erratic. Without a leader coordinating them, the enemy fleet began to break apart, disorganized and confused. Ships that had once moved as a single unit were now scattered, each one operating independently, vulnerable. "We've got them," Kara breathed, her voice barely audible over the commotion. "Their fleet's lost. They're panicking." But even as the enemy fell into disarray, Drake knew they couldn't stop now. The battle had been turned on its head, but the war wasn't over. The enemy's command ship might be crippled, but they were still a formidable force. Drake's team couldn't afford to relax. Not yet. He signaled to the crew, "Everyone, fall back. We've taken the comms, but we need to regroup. Kara, get us out of here. We'll finish this in one final blow." Kara immediately responded, locking down her console and starting to power up the Horizon's engines for their escape. The doors to the control room were still a battleground, but they'd achieved what they came for. The fleet was disorganized, vulnerable. They had the upper hand, but they weren't out of danger yet. As the crew retreated, the enemy's remaining forces continued to fight back, their desperation evident in every move. Drake's mind raced ahead to the next phase of the battle. The Nemesis was still alive, though battered, and now they needed to hit the enemy hard before they could regroup. The Horizon was ready, and the enemy fleet was divided. But one thought gnawed at him. There would be no turning back after this. They'd set a course for victory, but the cost would be immense. Each of them would have to fight harder, sacrifice more. This wasn't just a battle. It was a test of survival, and they were all in it together. Kara gave one last look at the disarrayed command center. "We're pulling out now, Commander." Drake nodded, watching as their ship, once again, engaged its engines and pushed forward into the chaos of space. The battle was far from over, but they had won a critical victory. The final confrontation was coming, and this time the enemy wouldn't know what hit them. The atmosphere in the Horizon's command deck was tense, the quiet hum of the ship's engines filling the otherwise deafening silence. Drake stood at the helm, staring out into the chaos of the battlefield. The enemy fleet, now scattered and without a unified command, was still dangerous. Despite the disarray, the remaining ships were attempting to regroup. It wouldn't take long before they reorganized and began making coordinated strikes again. Time was of the essence. Kara stood beside him, her fingers dancing over the control panel, eyes scanning the enemy fleet's movements. "They're trying to pull themselves together," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "But they don't have the leadership to back it up." Drake nodded, the weight of their mission pressing down on him. This wasn't just about winning this battle. It was about breaking the enemy's morale, proving that one ship, under the right leadership, could challenge even the mightiest fleet. He had to make sure this moment was remembered, that their enemies would never underestimate the power of the Horizon again. "We can't give them a chance to regroup," he said, turning to face Kara. "We need to strike hard, strike fast. Before they have time to adjust, get us into position." The Horizon powered through the debris field, moving swiftly and with precision, as if the ship itself understood the gravity of the moment. The crew was ready. They'd come this far, and there was no turning back now. As the ship came closer to the enemy's remaining vessels, the sense of anticipation grew thicker. The final act was upon them. Drake's eyes flicked to the tactical display, scanning for the fleet's most vulnerable targets. A small, heavily armed cruiser had broken off from the main force. It was weak, cut off from the rest of the fleet, and almost completely alone. It was the perfect opportunity for a devastating strike. But he knew that if they moved too fast, they might expose themselves to a counterattack. "Prepare for an attack," Drake commanded, his voice cold but calm. "We'll hit that cruiser and then pull back. We'll draw the rest of them into the trap." Kara glanced at the tactical readout again. "Got it. Setting course. We'll be in range in 30 seconds. The seconds felt like hours as Drake watched the cruiser grow closer. His mind raced with tactics, every possibility running through his thoughts, but he couldn't afford hesitation. He had to act decisively, or everything they had fought for would be lost. The Horizon was faster, more maneuverable than most of the ships in the enemy fleet, but the cruiser was a formidable opponent, armed to the teeth with heavy weaponry. It wasn't an easy target, but it was a calculated risk. "Now," Drake shouted, his words slicing through the silence. The Horizon surged forward, cutting through the space with deadly grace. The cruiser attempted to turn, but it was too slow, too disorganized to mount any effective defense. Kara fired the first shot, a concentrated blast from the ship's forward cannons. The beam of energy struck the cruiser's shields, and for a moment, there was a bright flash of light. The crew braced themselves as the shockwave from the explosion rattled the hull. But the shields held for now. It was the first round, the opening blow. "Target their engines," Drake commanded. "We need to disable them." Kara didn't hesitate. Her hands moved like lightning, redirecting the ship's fire to the cruiser's propulsion system. The Horizon's weapons were precision-focused, a combination of firepower and speed that made it a deadly force in space combat. This time, the blast found its mark. A violent explosion rippled across the cruiser's rear, and the ship lurched forward, the damage to its engines severe enough to send it spiraling out of control. "Direct hit," Kara shouted, a smile playing at the edge of her lips. "Engines are down. They're not going anywhere." Drake's gaze never left the tactical readout. He knew the real fight was about to begin. The cruiser was crippled, but it wasn't finished. The enemy was already beginning to respond, mobilizing their nearby ships to assist. The remaining vessels were slowly coming into range, and the danger of being overwhelmed was very real. "We've got incoming," Kara warned, her voice sharp with urgency. "They're sending reinforcements." Drake didn't flinch. He had anticipated this. He'd set the trap. The Horizon's maneuverability and the surprise of the initial strike had given them the upper hand. But it wouldn't last long if they didn't finish what they started. He turned to the comms officer. "Alert the fleet," he said, his voice firm. "Tell them to move in. We need to finish this now." The crew's confidence was unwavering. They'd proven they could take on the best of the enemy, and now they would prove they could finish the job. The Horizon made a sharp turn, once again gaining distance from the disintegrating cruiser. The remaining enemy ships, now in full pursuit, were closing in. Drake's mind raced as he calculated their next move. This was the moment, the last stand, the point where everything would either fall apart or come together in their favor. Kara's hands were steady on the console, her eyes tracking the enemy's movements with laser focus. "We got one shot at this. If we take them out now, the fleet will be finished." "Then we take them out," Drake said, his voice low but resolute. He turned to face his crew, seeing the determination in their eyes. "This is the moment we show them what we're made of. No mercy." As the Horizon moved toward the enemy fleet, the crew braced for what would be their most dangerous attack yet. The final moments of the battle were upon them. Would they prevail, or would the enemy manage to regroup and turn the tide? Drake couldn't afford to think about the outcome. He had to make sure that the Horizon would be the one to write the final chapter of this war. And with one final move, he would make sure the galaxy would never forget the legend of the Horizon. The Horizon was now deep within the heart of the enemy formation, a single defiant star in the middle of a battlefield that stretched across the stars. Drake's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The remaining enemy ships had gathered, forming a new, tighter formation. But it was clear they were too late. The Horizon had already broken their morale, and they were scrambling to mount any kind of organized defense. It was their final chance to strike, or be utterly defeated. Kara worked at the controls, her hands moving with swift precision, her focus razor-sharp. "We've got 3 ships closing in fast," she reported. "They're trying to encircle us, but they're not coordinating. They're too disjointed." Drake nodded. He could see it too. Despite their overwhelming numbers, the enemy was still struggling to respond in any meaningful way. The Horizon had broken their tactical cohesion, and now it was only a matter of time before the final strike. "Steady," Drake said, his voice calm but firm. "We've got them on the ropes. Prepare to break their formation." Kara glanced at him, a determined gleam in her eyes. Breaking formation now. Engaging evasive maneuvers. The Horizon dipped and weaved, its advanced systems allowing it to slip through the enemy's fire with breathtaking agility. Laser beams streaked past the ship's hull, but none found their mark. The enemy was too slow to adjust, too disoriented from the earlier strikes. The crew's hands were steady. They knew this moment well. They had worked for this. Drake's mind was completely in the zone. The ship was moving like an extension of his own body, every movement calculated. The battle had reached its peak, and he knew this was the final push. One decisive move would end it all. "Now," he muttered under his breath, and within seconds, the Horizon's cannons unleashed a series of devastating, pinpoint shots at the nearest ship. The blast connected, and the enemy vessel exploded in a spectacular burst of light. The shockwave reverberated through the battlefield, sending nearby ships into disarray. The remaining enemy forces were now completely on edge. "We've got them," Kara shouted triumphantly. But Drake's eyes never left the screen. They weren't out of danger yet. The remaining 2 enemy ships closed in from opposite directions. One was a heavy cruiser, its shields still operational, but struggling. The other was a fighter ship, nimble but lightly armed, clearly trying to outmaneuver them. Drake's heart raced. This was the final test. Could they end this now, or would the fleet turn the tide at the last moment? "Prepare for the final assault," Drake ordered. "I want the fighter down first. It's faster, more dangerous. Kara, focus on it." Kara didn't hesitate. Her fingers flew over the console, guiding the Horizon as it locked onto the fighter. The smaller ship was darting through the debris field, but it couldn't outrun the Horizon's advanced targeting system. Kara fired a series of pulse lasers, each shot landing with surgical precision, slowly chipping away at the fighter's shields. The fighter attempted to break off, but it was too late. The Horizon was already on it, and a final blast tore through the ship, sending it spiraling into space, its wreckage disintegrating in the cold expanse. The victory was bittersweet. Drake didn't allow himself to feel the satisfaction of the kill yet. He had one more enemy to face, the cruiser. Its shields were holding, but just barely, and it was still trying to make a desperate escape. The enemy captain, whoever he was, knew that this was his final stand. The odds were stacked against him. But in war, desperation often made enemies more dangerous. "Finish it," Drake said, his voice calm but deadly. Kara locked on to the cruiser's weak point. The engines, with a deft movement, she fired a direct hit at the rear of the ship. The blast detonated with a massive explosion, tearing through the cruiser's propulsion system. The ship lurched violently as its power died. It drifted into space, a sitting target. "Take it down," Drake commanded, and with a single decisive shot, the Horizon fired its final weapon. The cruiser erupted in a fiery ball of energy, and the enemy ship was no more. Silence followed. For a brief moment, it felt as though the galaxy had frozen in time. The horizon hung in space, its systems still humming, but the battlefield was silent. No more gunfire, no more chaos. The enemy fleet had been broken. Their morale shattered. The galaxy had witnessed the impossible. A single warship taking on a full fleet and winning. But Drake wasn't celebrating yet. There was no time for that. As the debris from the last ship floated away, he turned to his crew, their faces now visible on the screens. "Status report," he ordered. Kara gave him a quick glance. "No immediate threats, sir. We've neutralized all enemy forces. The field is clear." Drake let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The battle was over. They had done it. He turned to the comms officer. "Get a transmission out to command. Let them know the mission is a success. Tell them the fleet has been defeated, and the Horizon is the last ship standing." "Message sent, sir," the comms officer replied, a slight edge of pride in his voice. Drake allowed himself a small, fleeting smile. The Horizon had been through hell, but they had emerged victorious. And now, as the stars stretched out before them, he knew that this battle would go down in history. The story of how one ship, against all odds, had defeated an entire fleet would be told for generations to come. The legacy of the Horizon was just beginning.